Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's press briefing. My name is Marie-Agnes Heine, and I'm the head of the Communication Department of the European Medicines Agency. Today, we will first update you on the most recent developments regarding COVID-19 vaccines and treatments, and you will then have ample time for questions. I'm delighted to have here with me three colleagues today: Dr. Marco Cavaleri, the head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy and chair of the EMA Pandemic Task Force; Dr. Fergus Sweeney, the head of the Clinical Studies and Manufacturing Task Force; and Dr. Georgy Genov, the head of Pharmacovigilance. Please note that your microphone is disabled for the duration of this briefing and will be opened up only for your question if you have raised your hand. As always, the briefing is broadcast via YouTube and Europe by satellite. The footage can be used free of charge by all media, and you will find the respective links in the invite to this briefing. I'm now giving the floor to EMA's Head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Marco Cavaleri, who will provide you with a short update. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining for our third COVID-19 press briefing this year. I will provide you with a brief update on some recent developments, and then we will open up the floor for questions, as always. So to start, our Medicine Committee, the CHMP, last week has recommended a conditional marketing authorization for the antiviral Paxlovid for treating COVID-19 in adults who are at increased risk of hospitalization and death. This is an important addition to our portfolio of therapeutics because it is the first oral antiviral that was approved for marketing in the European Union. This medicine is authorized for people with COVID-19 who are still not too sick but are at increased risk of progression to severe COVID because of a variety of underlying conditions or other factors that make them vulnerable. It should be used as early as possible after the onset of symptoms in patients that tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. In fact, Paxlovid is effective during the early stages of the disease when the virus replication is more pronounced and starts spreading to the lower respiratory tract in vulnerable patients. This therapeutic combines a protease inhibitor, which is a substance that prevents the virus from replicating within the cells in our body, with another substance, which is an approved antiviral for the treatment of HIV, which is given in low amounts with the only purpose of slowing the metabolism of the SARS-CoV-2 antiviral to ensure that it stays in the body in sufficiently high concentrations. The two medicines are included in a single package but are distinct tablets. One aspect that needs to be handled properly when this medicinal product is going to be prescribed and used is the potential occurrence of significant drug interaction with other medications. In this respect, the product information describes the type of interaction that can be expected and which concomitant use with other medicinal product is contraindicated. EMA has notified healthcare professionals about the importance of ensuring correct use of this new therapeutic for COVID when co-administered with other drugs. The recommendation of the CHMP is based on the result of a randomized study which showed that the treatment with Paxlovid significantly reduces hospitalization or deaths in patients who had at least one underlying condition, such as diabetes, obesity, or chronic lung disease. And this increased their risk of developing severe COVID-19. Importantly, the data from the laboratory studies indicate that Paxlovid is also active against Omicron and other variants of concern. The arrival of these new therapeutic options is very welcome news that has to be seen in the wider context of the available resources to prevent and treat COVID-19. In terms of antivirals, among those already authorized for use in the EU, beside Paxlovid, is also Veklury, which is based on remdesivir, which can be used also to treat infections with Omicron. We have also seen laboratory studies that indicate that molnupiravir, which is an antiviral currently being evaluated by the EMA, would also be effective against Omicron. However, it is expected that many neutralizing monoclonal antibodies will lose their efficacy against Omicron. At present, Xevudy, which is based on sotrovimab, appears to be the only EU-approved monoclonal antibody that can neutralize Omicron. We are looking into emerging evidence to determine if also the monoclonal antibodies cocktail called Evusheld, which is currently being evaluated under rolling review for prevention of COVID-19, would be effective against this variant. In any case, the monoclonal antibodies are effective against Delta and other variants that might still be in circulation and remain valuable complementary tools to tackle COVID-19. EMA will continue to monitor closely the emerging evidence around the effectiveness of the monoclonal antibodies against Omicron. Let me, however, reiterate that vaccines continue to be the most important cornerstone of our response to the pandemic. Recent real-world evidence studies have shown that vaccination, and especially boosters, play a significant role in the prevention of severe outcomes from Omicron infection. People who have received 3 vaccine doses show a high degree of protection from severe disease and hospitalization. Therefore, we once again call on all EU citizens to complete their primary vaccination series and for those who are eligible to get a booster shot. The Omicron wave is progressing throughout Europe and most of the world, and we have seen the emergence of additional subvariants of Omicron, such as the so-called BA2 variant, which is spreading in many countries. It is too early to say to what extent this variant differs from Omicron in terms of transmissibility and immune evasion, noting, however, that remains a closely related strain to Omicron. Moving to the state of play on boosters, EMA is currently evaluating an application to extend use of the booster dose of Comirnaty to adolescents from 16 to 17 years of age. We are also expecting to receive shortly a similar application for a booster dose of Comirnaty in 12 to 15 years old, and the EMA will review these applications in an accelerated manner with the objective to reach an opinion as soon as possible. We will be reviewing any emerging data, including those from Israel, with respect to use of a second booster dose of the current vaccines. At the moment, however, there is insufficient evidence from clinical trials or real-world evidence that could support a recommendation for the general population. The degree of vaccine effectiveness of the current vaccines over time and as the Omicron wave unfolds would also be relevant data to inform on the need and timing of any additional booster dose. As we already said in the past, for severely immunocompromised patients that receive a primary series of 3 doses of messenger RNA vaccine, a 4th dose would be the first booster shot, which is already recommended. Following the ICMRA workshop on updated COVID-19 vaccines, we have continued our interaction with manufacturers and international regulators to define the development plans for updated vaccines. We very much welcome the start of the first clinical studies investigating Omicron monovalent vaccines as a starting point. As agreed with international regulators, we are also strongly encouraging manufacturers to explore alternative options such as bivalent vaccines. With respect to vaccines under rolling review, we will see by when the evaluation of Valneva and Sanofi Pasteur vaccines could advance towards any possible approval. In any case, it will require some additional time from now, and it is not possible to say precisely if there are chances of having an approval by Easter. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the efforts the EMA has put into making detailed information on vaccines and treatments against COVID available to the public. Detailed information on the development and authorization of vaccines and treatment is available on our website through the publication of the European Public Assessment Report for every authorized vaccine and therapeutic, with detailed information about the assessment and the authorized product information. EMA is also publishing the clinical data submitted to the agency in the context of any regulatory procedures for COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics. And this data can be consulted on the EMA's dedicated clinical data website, and anyone who is interested in this data can access the website following registration. This is an extraordinary measure, and we are proud that, together with Health Canada, we are the only regulators worldwide to publish the clinical data that underpin our decision on COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. As we come to a close, I would like to mention the conclusion of the legislative process on EMA's revised mandate. The new regulation, which will become applicable as of the 1st of March, will strengthen the agency's coordination role in the EU, particularly in managing shortages of medicinal products and medical devices, and preparing for and responding to future health threats. In terms of crisis preparedness, the extending mandate gives a permanent footing to several of the structures and processes that EMA established during the pandemic to speed up the development of therapeutics and vaccines. For instance, the new regulation reinforces the activity of the COVID-19 EMA Pandemic Task Force, the ETF. The ETF will provide scientific advice on medicines intended to treat and prevent diseases that cause public health emergencies, as well as supporting EMA's committees in their tasks related to the evaluation and safety monitoring of medicines. EMA is working hard to ensure a smooth implementation of the new rules, which will allow us to increase our added value for all European citizens. I will stop here and give the floor back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavaleri. We will now take questions from the floor. And dear colleagues from the media, please turn on your camera if you want to ask a question and click on the icon at the bottom of the WebEx window to raise your hand. When I give you the floor, we will unmute you and you can ask your question once your microphone has been enabled. The first question is from Maria Psara from Greece, from EFSIN. Maria?
Hello, actually it's Maria Psara with Star TV Greece, but thank you for the floor and thank you for the briefing. I have two questions, if I may. First one, we see a relaxation of all measures in member states, plus some member states don't use the COVID pass anymore. What is your opinion on this? And do we see the end of the tunnel? And the second question, on the other hand, there is still a high death rate in some member states. How could you explain that? Because we see that in Greece, we see that in many member states. Why, although in some member states the death toll is falling, in other member states remains very high? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Unfortunately, the first question on, the COVID pass is not really within the remit of EMA, and therefore I would ask you to perhaps turn to both national authorities and the European Commission for this question. On the second one, regarding the high death rate, this is also not really our remit, but I can ask Dr. Fergus Sweeney to perhaps give you a little bit an overview of how these vaccines work normally.
So clearly we've had a very extensive rollout across the EU of the primary vaccinations and also increasing use of boosters in recent months, particularly in the elderly and vulnerable people. But we know very much with the different variants that have come across, the Delta and now the Omicron, these waves of infection across the EU and different populations with different timing. And we also know that in different parts of the EU, the level of vaccination is variable and not always as high as we would hope. So differences in the progress of the disease and the impact of the disease arise because of these conditions, and also, as you referred earlier, the differences in approach in the populations. But these waves will progress, and we know that also the mortality follows the infection waves by a number of weeks, because that obviously occurs as the serious disease has progressed.
Thank you very much. I'm now taking a question from Giovanni Del Rey from Avvenire, an Italian paper. Yes, Giovanni, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I have a question concerning the booster shots, because Dr. Cavaleri was mentioning exactly as one of the main avenues to fight this pandemics. I have a very specific question concerning the Janssen vaccine, because some are saying that Janssen vaccine with one booster shot is not equivalent to people who got Pfizer or Moderna and then a third shot. Is there any scientific basis for this kind of assessment? So is, according to EMA, Johnson & Johnson with just one extra shot completely boosted, or is there an indication that actually those who have been vaccinated with Johnson & Johnson should get also a third shot? Thank you very much. That's my question.
Thank you very much. So the question about the Janssen vaccine and the effectiveness of booster shots, I'm going to give this question to Dr. Cavaleri.
Yeah, indeed, we approved the Janssen vaccine as a single dose as primary series, and we approved the second dose as the booster shot, which can be given after 2 months from the first shot. And this is based on a number of studies, including a large randomized clinical trial that looked into efficacy and showed that indeed 2 doses of the Janssen vaccine produce quite high level of protection, both from symptomatic disease and severe disease. And therefore, for us, this is the current recommendation with respect to the schedule to be used for the Janssen vaccine. Of course, it's up to member states to look whether the level of protection achieved with this vaccine with 2 doses might be different than what achieved with other type of vaccines and following a different number of doses. And it's up to them to decide if they want to give some extra doses. But for us, at the moment, there is no evidence to suggest that this would be needed. However, as always, we look into any new emerging evidence that could support such type of use.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Ludwig Berger from Reuters. Ludwig, please.
Many thanks. I'd like to know on Paxlovid, please. I understand it was tested on the non-vaccinated, yet your recommendation covers everyone, I understand. So is there a need to assess the benefit further on a vaccinated population? If I can ask on another subject of Omicron-specific vaccines. So what's your best guess when such a vaccine could be approved on the timing? And secondly, you've clearly made your preference clear for multivalent, polyvalent vaccines, but would you stop a monovalent vaccine right now or slow it down, even though that might be for now the fastest opportunity to have something on the market? Would you rather wait for polyvalent vaccines to then be followed up with? So I'm just really curious about your preferences on the timing there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ludwig. In the end, these were the 3 questions. And the first one on Paxlovid, I'm going to give to Dr. Cavaleri. And then I think on Omicron, Dr. Fergus can give you some indication. And the last one on multivalent versus monovalent variant vaccine will be given to Dr. Cavaleri as well. Dr. Cavaleri.
Yeah, so indeed it's true that for Paxlovid, the study was conducted in non-vaccinated people, even if there was a certain amount of patients that were seropositive. So our assumption is that there will still be benefit even in people that have been vaccinated and have breakthrough infection, but of course we cannot really quantify if this benefit will be really of the same size of what we've seen in the clinical trial. So it will be important to follow up post-approval to collect more evidence that indeed would show what is then the real impact of Paxlovid when used in people that have been vaccinated. And not forgetting also that the study of Paxlovid was conducted in a pre-Omicron era. So it would be also important to see what is the impact of the use of such antivirals when Omicron is spreading around. And that's why we are collaborating with clinicians across Europe and in other parts of the world to make sure that we collect the evidence that will inform us precisely of where we stand on this.
Thanks. Dr. Cavaleri, do you also want to already respond to the multivalent versus monovalent?
Yeah, so as said, we think that it would be good to explore different options. So we never said that an Omicron monovalent vaccine would not be a good option. Simply, we cannot say right now in a definitive way, and we really would benefit from having different investigational vaccine to be put into clinical trials so that we get really a broad information around what is the immunogenicity of these different constructs, and then at the end decide which one is the best one. In our view, that would be the most robust way forward, but at the same time, if an Omicron monovalent vaccine can be put into clinical trials rapidly, I think we can only support that, and we are looking forward to seeing those data as soon as possible, because indeed we don't know how the pandemic will unfold from now on and after this Omicron wave, so we have to be prepared for all possible scenarios.
Thank you very much. This probably already responded to the question on the timing, but I don't know, Fergus, do you want to add to this?
No, but clearly we need to see the studies, which I understand have started on the Omicron variant, and then evaluate the data. But I think it's important to emphasize that the decision to switch manufacturing or to switch vaccination strategies to an Omicron variant or another solution, and the timing of that is not one of the regulator. We look at the data which supports the use of a particular vaccine, its efficacy and how that works, but there's a wider public health decision to be made, and that's beyond us in terms of actually deciding to switch the manufacturing and vaccination campaigns to another variant vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sweeney. I'm now giving the floor to Gerardo D'Amico from Italian Rai.
Thank you. I would like to know if you think that we are just passing the fourth pandemic wave, or as someone say, we are at the end of the pandemic due to less serious clinical effects of Omicron. And then I would like to know when the EMA evaluated the administration of vaccine
Sorry, you were muted now. We only heard the first question that was talking about the fourth pandemic wave or the end of the pandemic, and the second question was you started with administration of vaccine, but we didn't hear the rest.
Yes, okay, right.
So what is the second question?
The second question is when the EMA will evaluate the administration of the vaccine from the 6 months, how is doing FDA USA.
Okay, you mean the vaccine for children from 6 months to 4 years, I think it is. Okay, so let's give the first question on the end of the pandemic to Dr. Sweeney. Dr. Sweeney, please.
So I think EMA's role is to monitor the data on the safety and efficacy of vaccines and therapeutics, and to authorize those and update those authorizations as we get the appropriate data. But the decisions on the epidemiology, on where we are with the public health emergency and a pandemic lie with other public health authorities at European and global level. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the question on the vaccine for younger children. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, so we are in discussion with the company, and we will try to understand by when this data can be submitted to the EMA as well. As you know, the clinical study in this age group is still ongoing, so we will have to take into account also when the final data will be made available with respect to this trial. But we are closely following up on this topic.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Helen Collis from Politico. Helen, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all fine.
Great. You mentioned, Marco, an update on Valneva's vaccine. No decision before Easter. That's a slightly different date to what the company has told me. Can you explain to me why you think nothing will happen before Easter? And then secondly, could you also please update us on the assessments for the Sputnik V vaccine, the vaccines from Sinovac and Sanofi Pasteur, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first one, Valneva. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, so indeed, we are in discussion with the company. As you know, the rolling review has started already, but we need really to look into the results of such clinical trials and to make an assessment, including having a good understanding of whether the data will be covering the entirety of the adult population or they will be restricted. That's why it looks like it will take a bit more time before we can really conclude the assessment here. Of course, if the data will come sooner and we will be in the position that there are no major problems with the clinical study results, we could even think about having a conclusion earlier than that. But to be realistic, it's difficult for us to see that we will be in the position to conclude before Easter time.
Thank you very much. Now on the other vaccines that are currently under rolling review, Dr. Sweeney, please, Sputnik and Sinovac.
So there we continue the process of looking at information and data provided by the companies, the developers. We have carried out a number of inspections, as you know already, and we need to bring all that information together, but still awaiting resolution of a number of matters for that review to continue. You asked also about the Sanofi Pasteur. I'd give that back to Marco. He can perhaps give a more specific detail on that. But for the others, the process continues, but we need further data and information to be able to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marco, please.
No, indeed, also for Sanofi Pasteur, we are really in touch with the company to really understand by when the clinical trial results can be made available, as indeed that will be really needed before we can really understand what could be the timetable. But again, if things can move on rapidly with this vaccine, we will be very eager to do so, and it's much dependent on the availability of the clinical trial data at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question from Victoria English from MedNu. Victoria, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to go back to Dr. Cavaleri's opening presentation when he talked about the discussions with industry on the design of future vaccines, either mono or multivalent. Will you be using in your, is it envisioned that all of the different types of vaccines that have thus far been approved will be part of this discussion? In other words, not just the mRNA vaccines.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavaleri, please, on the different vaccines.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Indeed, we are talking to all the manufacturers of EU-approved vaccine because we need to understand what are the plan, and we will be progressing with them as well to really understand by when updated vaccines can be made available. It might take a little bit longer, but we really hope that also there we can move quite fast and try to understand what could be the best option also for these vaccines too.
Thank you very much. I don't see any additional hands up. Obviously, we have responded to all your questions, at least for today. So thank you very much for your questions and for your interest in our work, and also a big thank you to my colleagues who participated today. Please note that the next regular press briefing will take place in 2 weeks' time on Thursday, 17 February. And if you have any further questions or feedback for us, please do not hesitate to follow up with the press office at press@ema.europa.eu. Many thanks for today and goodbye.